Hello everyone, I hope y'all are having a great Thursday and y'all are doing well. And tonight we'll be talking about our severe weather threat for tonight, and we'll touch on that just briefly, and then we'll be talking about tomorrow's severe weather threat on Friday the 7th, and then we'll talk about Saturday's severe weather threat on the 8th, and we'll be talking about our pattern across parts of the U.S. later in the video. But I will have chapters in the video, so if y'all want to skip around to any places you want, so I'll have chapters for tonight's severe weather threat, tomorrow's, and Saturday's, and then I should have a chapter for our just general overall pattern for the U.S. towards the end of the video. So if y'all want to click around for that, you totally can, but let's get started here. So just quickly looking at our severe weather threat tonight, this is our 01Z update here, and this is our latest update, latest Storm Prediction Center update, and the next update will come out in about 3.5 hours. So first we'll be looking at our severe weather threat, or our Storm Prediction Center's look for the central U.S., and we'll look at the eastern U.S. in just a second. So we do have a slight risk right here into parts of the panhandle of Texas and then into western Oklahoma. Around that is a marginal risk there from parts of western Oklahoma into the panhandle of Texas. Then looking east, we do have a marginal risk here, and that is into parts of eastern North Carolina and northeastern South Carolina. Then looking to our south, we do have a marginal risk down here, and this is in most of the Florida Peninsula here into parts of central and eastern Florida. Looking at our tornado risk, we actually finally don't have a tornado risk with any of these storms tonight, which is great. Looking at our wind risk, we do have a 5% here into Oklahoma and Texas, and a 15% and a 5% surrounding that. Looking east into North Carolina and South Carolina, a 5% risk here for our wind risk. Then looking to the south into the Florida Peninsula, just a 5% wind risk down there. Then looking at our hail risk, we do have a 5% risk here into parts of western Oklahoma and the panhandle of Texas. Then looking to the southeast, we do have a 5% risk down here for our hail risk, and then up here in North Carolina and South Carolina, we do not have a hail risk at this time. Now looking into parts of the panhandle of Texas and western Oklahoma, so for right now we just have some storms that are kind of draped over into parts of the panhandle of Texas and western Oklahoma, and these storms will really begin to weaken over the next couple of hours. And looking here into the panhandle and western Oklahoma, really those storms will be weakened substantially just in the next hour or two, and then by late tonight and early tomorrow there should be little to no rain in the area. And the only main risk with these storms that are kind of ongoing and weakening at the moment is that little bit of a hail risk and the wind risk. Now looking into parts of northeastern South Carolina and parts of eastern North Carolina, you do have a couple of storms mainly into parts of east central and eastern North Carolina here, and then over the next couple of hours those will continue to move east, and they may weaken just a little bit, but you could have some more storms that begin to form over parts of eastern North Carolina and the Outer Banks, and then you will have more clusters that do show up on the 01Z HRRR model. I did forget to talk about to tell that I was using the HRRR, but I am using the HRRR 01Z, by the way. And looking here still into parts of southeastern North Carolina, mainly you'll have those storms, and then just some more maybe showers moving through later into the night and early tomorrow on Friday, and this will be pretty early tomorrow on Friday, but then you still have some showers here still moving through, and that'll be early tomorrow morning. But by the early and mid-morning hours tomorrow, they should be completely out of South Carolina and North Carolina. Then looking into the Florida Peninsula here, we do have a couple of storms still throughout parts of maybe central and southern Florida, and then over the next couple of hours these will begin to weaken and really move off the Florida East Florida coast here, and then into the Atlantic. And you could have maybe a couple storms and showers into parts of southern Florida, but overall the severe weather threat will continue to decrease in parts of Florida, and you really just will have a couple of strong storms as you get later into the night and into early tomorrow on Friday. Now looking at our day 2 outlook tomorrow on Friday the 7th, we do have a slight risk here into parts of northern Kansas and much of central and southern Nebraska. Around that is a large marginal risk all the way from parts of northeastern New Mexico and then up to the north into parts of Nebraska, then east into Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma here, panhandle of Texas, eastern Colorado, and then into a large part of Kansas there. Looking at our tornado risk with this, we do have a little bit of an area of a 2% risk here, and that is into northern Kansas and much of central and southern Nebraska. Our wind risk is a 15% here into parts of northern Kansas and central and southern Nebraska. Around that is a 5% all the way from parts of northeastern New Mexico, then to the northeast and east into the panhandle of Texas, into the panhandle in northwestern Oklahoma, eastern Colorado, a little bit of Nebraska there, into Kansas, and then even to a portion of northwest Missouri and into parts of southwestern Iowa. Then looking at our hail risk with this, we do have a large 5% here, and this may get upgraded, but for right now it'll just be at a 5% for tomorrow on Friday. But we do have a large 5% here, and that is into parts of eastern Colorado, into Kansas, into Missouri, Iowa, and much of Nebraska here. Now looking at the 0ZHRRR for tomorrow on Friday in the central U.S. If we go to, let's see, tomorrow morning, you could have maybe some showers starting to develop in parts of northern Nebraska and southern South Dakota here. And then going into the early afternoon hours here, you still don't really have much going on in the central U.S. But then as you go into the early and the mid-afternoon hours, and then later into the early evening hours, you do have some cells trying to show up here into northern Nebraska and southern South Dakota. And then this will definitely, these storms will have that little bit of a hail threat as well as definitely the wind threat with that. And then as you get some of these storms that start to develop in parts of northern Kansas and then even into much of central and southern Nebraska, you will have that little bit of a tornado risk with that, but mainly that wind and hail risk with these storms. And as you can see, you have pretty strong storms here into parts of northeast Nebraska tomorrow evening, late tomorrow evening, and then you still do have several storms that start to develop into parts of eastern Kansas and then into parts of Missouri and Iowa as well. And these will eventually kind of grow into a large cluster of storms, and then you still do have a little bit of activity down here into parts of the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma. Just a few storms, mostly capable of that damaging wind risk. And then looking to our east still, you do have that large cluster there moving into parts of Missouri, Iowa, and throughout Nebraska. This will be late tomorrow evening into tomorrow night. And then as you get into later in late tomorrow night, you do have this large cluster of pretty strong storms. Might be severe, but we'll have to watch this too as they get into parts of northwestern Missouri, southwestern Iowa, northeastern Kansas, and southeastern Nebraska. And then going into pretty late tomorrow night, and then eventually into very early on Saturday, you still do have this large cluster moving kind of southeastward here into mainly Missouri. So we'll have to watch that maybe for a wind threat with those storms and possibly a little bit of a hail threat as well. And then by very early on Saturday, well before the sun rises, you will have quite a few showers and storms may be severe, but definitely strong into parts of Missouri, and even pretty strong showers into Illinois there. And then still going into early on Saturday morning, you still just have maybe some thunderstorm activity here, but mainly showers into parts of Missouri, and then even into Arkansas and maybe even Tennessee here. But the severe weather threat will probably peak, I would say, in the early to mid evening hours, and then it'll probably persist throughout the later nighttime hours and into very early on Saturday. Looking at our surface moisture with our dew points here, you do have that moisture that surges north into the early and mid evening hours, and this will be what you'll have to watch for with that push of moisture to the north. And then even into Kansas, you have dew points into maybe the 70s showing up on these 0Z HRRRT parts of eastern Kansas. Then looking up here into Nebraska, dew points well into the upper 60s in some spots, and maybe even hitting into the lower 70s in some spots as that moisture pushes to the north. But as you have those storms that move to the southeast in that cluster, you'll have plenty of moisture with all of those storms as they move southeast. Looking at our temperatures mainly into Nebraska and Kansas, you'll even have temperatures into parts of southwestern Kansas maybe tomorrow. On the 0Z HRRR, it shows them 104, 107 maybe there. But into Nebraska, you'll definitely have plenty of heat up there, with those temperatures into the upper 80s throughout most of Nebraska, and then into the lower 90s, maybe into parts of southwestern Nebraska there. Now looking at the 3-kilometer NAM for tomorrow, let's see. So it does show some more isolated storms into parts of southern Kansas there. And then really with our Nebraska storms, it shows a similar thing, and then even some storms into the panhandle of Oklahoma and maybe Texas. But then it does show pretty strong storms throughout much of Nebraska, and then going farther to the later evening hours and nighttime hours tomorrow, it shows a pretty similar setup. More storms that show up into parts of central and western Kansas tomorrow night. And then you generally do have that same look with those clusters moving to the southeast into parts of Iowa, Missouri, eastern Kansas, and southeastern Nebraska there. Looking at our instability on the 21Z wrap with our mixed layer cape here. So you do have plenty of instability, 2,000 plus joules per kilogram into parts of central Nebraska, and then looking even into Kansas, well over 4,000 joules per kilogram of that mixed layer cape, then even into southern South Dakota, and then even northern Nebraska, cape values well over 3,000 joules per kilogram showing up there. And then as you get later into the night, you still do have a little bit of instability here into maybe where that cluster is, but really as that cluster of storms moves to the southeast, it'll lose quite a bit of that instability, so it should weaken pretty fast as it moves to the southeast. Looking at our low-level jet on the 21Z wrap, you still do have plenty of low-level shear with that low-level jet, and this will help with our little bit of a tornado risk tomorrow. And then just quickly looking at a sounding into, maybe we'll click into central, we'll do southeastern Nebraska here, we'll do right about there, and see if we can get a sounding. So you do have a little bit of a curved photograph there. Let's see if we can get a better sounding. Here's a kind of a better sounding here. You have that curve there, instability, a little bit of instability there on the sounding specifically, but I honestly would not be surprised if that tornado 2% is extended to the east just a little bit, because that low-level jet does intensify as it as we go later into the night tomorrow night. And then we'll just take a sounding here, maybe into eastern Kansas, and let's see if we can get a good sounding. We'll do western Missouri here, and then you still do have a little bit of instability here on this sounding, but you do have a little bit of a curve there, and that hodograph will go to the northwest a little bit. And as you can see here, a much broader curve right there in the hodograph. A little bit of instability here, but we'll just have to see with that cluster that moves to the southeast, and we'll see if that low-level jet really catches, I would say kind of catches up with those storms, and you'll have some instability with maybe some of them. We'll just have to watch that tomorrow night as you go into the later and nighttime hours. Now looking at our day 3 storm prediction centers outlook here on Saturday, June the 8th. We do have a large marginal risk here into parts of the central U.S., and that starts in eastern Colorado, then goes into southern Kansas, much of northern Oklahoma, then into central and southern Missouri, and northern and northwestern Arkansas there. So now we'll be looking at the 18Z GFS, mainly for the severe weather threat on Saturday, June the 8th. And really the reason why I personally just use the longer range models for day 3 kind of severe weather events is because the short range models, they do change quite a bit in the just a short amount of time from now until Saturday. So really I only use short range models for the day of and the next day, and the NAM, it does do an okay job at looking at our day 2, but as far as day 3 goes, it's kind of it doesn't do the best, but it does an okay job. So we may quickly look at the NAM as well for our Saturday severe weather threat. But looking here on Saturday at our 500 millibar winds, and that is in the mid levels. So looking, you can see a little bit of a short wave trough here, and that'll be responsible for our Saturday severe weather threats. And then as you can see, it slowly kind of moves off, and then gets into that flow there, and that'll be our main severe weather maker for Saturday. Now looking at our low-level jet Saturday and throughout the night into parts of early on Sunday, you do have a little bit of a low-level jet, and it really doesn't get the low-level jet really doesn't get pretty strong until in the later evening and nighttime hours on Saturday. But you will have to look here, maybe in some spots of Oklahoma, maybe Kansas, for maybe a brief tornado. But looking here, we do have a little bit of a curve there, and you do have some quite a decent amount of instability there, and your low levels are definitely moist. And looking here, you do have quite a bit of shear throughout the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. So you'll have to watch that for that little bit of a tornado risk, possibly on Saturday the 8th. And then really just look in there. You'll lose your low level jet as you go into early on Sunday, but the instability should pretty much be gone. We'll just take a sounding real quick here. Yeah, you don't really have a lot of instability here, but just for that little bit of a period late Saturday night, you'll have to watch that. Maybe into very early on Sunday, you'll just have to watch that, maybe for a little bit of a brief tornado threat with that. Now looking more towards the future into pretty much this weekend into parts of early next week, the biggest thing I'm watching, we do have that troughing into much of the northeast and northern U.S. into this weekend, and you have that ridge that will build a little bit, and probably it will be at its peak into this weekend. And then what I'm watching on the GFS, and then we'll look at the European model in just a second, is the Actually, we'll go to the 18Z. I was just looking at the 12Z, but at the looking at the 18Z specifically at our 500 millibar winds, you do have this trough here that shows up on the 18Z model, but there has not been a lot of consistency between each of these runs, so definitely do not take this as it's going to happen for sure. But we'll have to just keep watching this, as I said in my other video. But still, I mean, this would be, if this were to happen, but it's still kind of a little far out to kind of get a good look at this. But if this were to happen, this trough right here into kind of the Ohio Valley, it would be kind of a severe weather maker, maybe for parts of the eastern US, but still it's too far to really get into the small details right now. But it does show that trough, and then what is in good agreement between a couple of the models is that we will have maybe some sort of kind of a large trough early and mid next week. But now looking at the 12Z European model real quick, now it does show, obviously we do have that trough in there that's been showing up for quite some time in the ridge in the west, and then the European does have this trough, but it keeps it well to the north, and that probably wouldn't pull much moisture with it. But what I am looking at is this is kind of our, we do have a little bit of a trough right here into parts of Michigan, there into maybe the Great Lakes region, into the early mid and late next week, and then still going out. That's pretty far out, but still we do have some sort of system that may come through early next week. And as you can see, the European has it, and it kind of just merges with the flow there. I mean, you do have that trough there, but we'll definitely have to keep watching and see how this plays out. We'll look at the 0Z run from last night on the European, and I mean, it does show that trough again, but well to the east. So there's been a lot of back and forth between the models, and we'll just have to keep watching it for that maybe possibly a system next week. Going back to the GFS real quick here, we'll look at our dew points, and you will have moisture throughout, not really this weekend into the eastern US, but you will have pushes of moisture to the north, as we were just looking at with our severe weather threat for Saturday. And then as we go into early next week, that moisture's shunted to the south, mostly into the Gulf, and then into parts of Texas and Oklahoma. And then looking into early next week, you do have some moisture, especially into parts of the central US showing up there. But still, we'll really have to keep watching these next systems. But really, the severe weather threat will be mainly, if you do have a severe weather threat, you'll just have to watch your moisture for right now, because really, if you don't have any moisture or just moist air into the low levels, you will not have much of a severe weather threat. So we'll just have to keep watching this and see what happens, and see how the models change over the next couple of days, and even several days. So that's going to be it for tonight's video. I do appreciate all of y'all watching, and that was kind of a, I'm going to try to keep doing forecasts at that speed, so it don't feel like I'm dragging these out for y'all, because I know y'all don't want to watch a 20+ minute video of me talking. But I will have chapters in this video, as I've had in the most recent videos. So if y'all want to skip around and go to different parts of the video where y'all want to watch and see, you can definitely do that. But like I said, I'm going to try to keep this speed, so I don't feel like I'm dragging the video out, and I get to the stuff quickly, so y'all don't have to keep hearing me talk. But I do appreciate all of y'all watching, and I'm going to try to keep doing videos like this over the next couple of days, where I kind of have a kind of like a set schedule where I'll upload when there's severe weather. I mean, there's been severe weather for the past couple of days and the coming days, but definitely when there's any major severe weather threats in the future, I'll definitely try to cover that when I can. But that'll be it for this update, and I hope all of y'all have a great Thursday night or a great Friday morning whenever y'all are watching.